6. This section, this exercise is going to be optional. It's about adding listeners to a group of elements. So I have a group of elements right here, a bunch of buttons in a list, and it says that I can add it during runtime. Yeah, we already know that about adding event listeners. During runtime using JavaScript, add event listener for every button on the website and alert hello when any of them are clicked. So, and it says use the getElementByTagName function and then loop through all the button elements adding the event listener. So this is a little bit challenging for you guys because I haven't really taught you about loops or arrays in this sense. So let's see, how are we going to do this? So onload, let's see if the onload function works. Alert loaded, and let's go here, and of course I added an onload to onload. Just run the onload function right here, and when I run my code, loaded pops up, which is fine. And now here my click here, all these buttons, none of them work. Okay, so what do I want to do? I want to somehow grab these buttons. So document dot get element by, or elements by tag name, and I want to grab all the buttons, and I want to add event listener, and when it clicks, I want it to run say hello. And now write your function here. I can say function say hello, open and close brackets, and just alert a hello statement. Now when I run my code, loaded pops up, but none of them work. It turns out I can't do it this way, because when document getElementById button, it says there's no add event listener is not a function for getElementsByTagName. Now the reason for this is because, well, document.getElementByTagName buttons returns a bunch of data. It returns, so if I console log, first let's comment that out. If I console log buttons, and I say this is var buttons equals whatever that returns, document getElementByTagName buttons, and I try to console log it, if I run it, it basically gives me a bunch of HTML button element. Yeah, so it gives me a list of things. So I have to, that's why it says loop through them. So I have to loop through each one of them and give it an event listener. So how do you do that? So each button, there's a bunch, it's a list of buttons, and each one has an index starting from 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And this corresponds to 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 5 total buttons. And how do I loop through that? So I can say, get ready for something called a for loop. For, open brackets, button in buttons. One's plural and one's not. And what do I want to do? Well, let's console log button each time, see what happens. So for button, for every button in buttons, I'm going to console log the button, the individual button. Run. Let's get rid of this loaded. So what does it do? So it has a feature, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, length item, and named item. So what do I have to do? It takes on its index, or each button, for buttons has the list of buttons has attribute. Each attribute corresponds to one of the things. So button, there's a 0. So how do I access the individual button? Let's just answer that question. So I can say buttons, square brackets, and just throw button in here to see what happens. If I run my code, now I have these HTML document elements again. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And now I have a bunch of other stuff here. So, in fact, what do we want to do now? We want to take button.buttons. It's an HTML. Now I have each individual element. Dot. And add an event listener. So when I run it, click here. What did I do wrong? What's the problem? Unmatch this. What's happened here? Oh, I see. I have to close this brackets. So let's run it again. And if I click here, still have nothing, huh? Oh, why did it say C button? Run again. Now let's click. It says hello every time. And of course, I didn't do it perfectly. There's still a little error here. Right here on console. And that's because not everyone has an add event listener for all the attributes. So this button is taking on the value. This is the index. Anyway, this part is optional. This is how you loop through it and add an event listener to all of them. So that's how you do 7.6. Submit.